Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast.
Wilson, as he throws deep downfield, it's going to be caught by Metcalf for the touchdown.
Hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viennes.
Here's the drive deep to left. He has done it again. Wow. Kyle Lewis, 3 games, 3 home runs. Mariners have a 5-2 lead.
Brought to you by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. World-class audio recording right in the heart of the Woodinville Winery District.
Wide receivers to either side. Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over, baby.
Touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dan Cave Studios, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
All right, everybody, welcome back into the Dan Cave Studios. It's the Emerald City Sportscast, February 3rd, 2021. Can you believe that January is already over? We're already 1/12 of the way into 2021, and that's a good thing, right? Every month we get into this year is another month we get closer to things returning to normal, shall we say. Of course, it is Super Bowl week. Speaking of things that aren't really normal, but at least we have a football game to look forward to this weekend. Sure, it doesn't involve the Northwest or our team, but we're going to talk about it because it's Super Bowl week. Also today, I'll give you my thoughts on Cam Chancellor's piece in the Players Tribune this week. Still banging that drum. The decision to throw the ball at the goal line in Super Bowl 49 destroyed their team. That's what Cam says. Yeah, it's that time of year, so we will get into that again. And certainly we have some new listeners here on the 365 Sportscast Network, so I will once again give you my thoughts on the end of Super Bowl 49, because it's always a tough time of year. We always see the replays. Yesterday, I think it was 6 years ago today. So, yeah, we'll deal with all of that. In fact, lots of Seahawks talk today, mostly Seahawks talk. Despite only having 4 picks, could the Seahawks take a running back with their first pick this year? I'll touch on that. I'll be talking NFL free agency today a little bit. We're going to keep it narrow. 3 players that the Seahawks could pursue from the Rams who are free agents and could help with this transition on offense. Also, a little tidbit from an ESPN list about a potential reunion between Golden Tate and the Seahawks. Could that be happening? And finally, how does the Rams acquisition of Matthew Stafford shake up the NFC West? We will discuss. But first, we have headlines. Take it away, Ron Burgundy.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
And now, here's today's headlines, brought to you by FreeBets, the newest online sports betting comparison site. Check them out at freebets.us. All right, thanks to the guys at freebets.us for sponsoring this segment. Today's headline: Shane Waldron officially introduced as the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks and spoke to reporters yesterday for the first time. I will have the highlights of that press conference and some thoughts on what he said and what the Seattle offense may look like coming up this fall. Of course, Super Bowl 55 set to kick off Sunday in Tampa, pitting the hometown Buccaneers against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. No crazy media day this year, everything happening virtually, of course. How much of a home field advantage will it be for Tom Brady and the Bucs, first team ever to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium? The NFL announcing there will be 55,000 fans in the stands Sunday. But wait, 30,000 of those will be cardboard cutouts, only 25,000 real people, many of them vaccinated healthcare workers who were gifted tickets by the league. That's pretty cool. For what it's worth, I'll give you my Super Bowl pick later in the show. Baseball is one step closer. Spring training will proceed on time after the Major League Baseball Players Union rejected a request by the league to delay the start of spring training a month in hopes that COVID-19 infection rates would come down further. MLB had offered to play a 154-game regular season with full pay for everybody, but the players said they want to report on time and play the full 162. Mariners open spring training on the 17th, 2 weeks from today, believe it or not. And the other big baseball news, the other big top 100 prospect list came out this week.
made the Mariners look even better than the one last week after Baseball America placed 5 Mariner farmhands on their big list last week. MLB Pipeline named 7 Mariners to their top 100. The difference? Starting pitcher George Kirby checks in at number 92, and outfielder Taylor Trammell just squeaked in at number 100. And while BA and MLB Pipeline both had Jared Kelenic at number 4, Julio Rodriguez came in at number 5 in the MLB list after being listed 3rd by BA. Let's talk about Shane Waldron. If you joined me last week, we had Chris Clough on. He had some great insight into the hiring process and what he thought initially of the hire. It had just been announced the day before. Seahawks made it official earlier this week, and then Pete Carroll spoke about Shane Waldron, and then Waldron had his first chance to meet the press yesterday. And, a lot of times it's tough to glean things from these press conferences. Sometimes you hear a lot of cliches, a lot of things you expect to hear. It doesn't always go well, though. Case in point, Adam Gase's first press conference with the Jets, or Nick Sirianni's press conference with the Eagles last week. I wouldn't say that went swimmingly for him. Waldron's was interesting, and we're going to get into that. He's 41 years old again, kind of a little bit of background on Waldron. Raised in the Portland, Oregon area. Talked a lot about how excited his wife and kids were to return to the Northwest where they have family and friends. Of course, you know that Waldron, coming from the Rams, their passing game coordinator there, came over with McVay originally as a tight ends coach when McVay got the job in L.A. After coming from the Washington Redskins. Also spent time earlier in his career with the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick. Talked about how excited his family was, his wife and kids, to come back up to the Northwest. He has a lot of family and friends here, of course. He seems genuinely excited about working in Seattle. He seems like a genuine guy, like a normal dude, like not someone that was just, cutting and pasting things that he was taught to say. Said he was genuinely excited to work with Pete Carroll. His time facing Pete Carroll goes all the way back when he was a grad assistant at Notre Dame, doing some work there, faced off against Carroll at USC a couple times. Did not go well for him there. So we got an up-close look at Pete Carroll from an opposite sideline, dating all the way back to his college days. And he's excited to work with Russell Wilson as his new QB. We'll hear some of his comments on that. I wanted to share this with you, though. I thought this was great. Earlier in the week, after the Waldron hiring, there was a great quote that I don't know if it got enough traction. After the Waldron news broke, that from the guys that do the pre- and post-game show for the Los Angeles Rams. This is what they had to say. Quote, "If the Seahawks fans like the way the Rams offense looks now, and we all do, wait until they see it with Russell Wilson at the controls." Of course, the player at the controls of the Rams offense has been a big focus this week. We'll talk about the Jared Goff trade in just a little bit. But what will the Seahawks offense look like? That question was front and center. It was the first thing that reporters wanted to dig into when they talked to Waldron yesterday. Here were his thoughts initially on what we can expect from the Seahawks offense under Shane Waldron.
Really, for me, our offensive philosophy, we're going to be a balanced offense that's going to have that ability to create explosive plays with that attacking mindset. We want to be the one that the foot's on the gas pedal. We're going, and I know I'm sure some of these questions will come up, the tempo and all that different stuff. Well, hey, there's going to be a wide variety of pieces to this offense, but that mindset is never going to change. And how we get to that is really going to be all based on the players. So a couple of things there. Talked about balance, talked about explosive plays. That's right out of Pete Carroll's notebook, right? Oh, he's just saying what Pete Carroll wants to say. Well, before I get into some more thoughts about something else there, he said, I wanted to make sure that I expounded on that, because there was a real fear out there that Pete Carroll was just looking for a yes man, especially after he made those comments. And I wonder if you could get Pete Carroll in a moment of humility, if he would admit that maybe he shouldn't have said what he said the day after the season ended in that last press conference, where he talked about wanting to run the ball more. And he made it sound very, very much like he was going to be more involved in the offense, and he kind of wanted to dial back and scale back some of the advancements that the passing game had made over the last couple of years. So there was a sentiment out there among a portion of Seahawks fans that he's just looking for a yes man. Doesn't matter who they hire. I want to refute that.
I'll talk a little bit about how I think the hire itself kind of disputes that. But Waldron touched on that himself, and I want you to listen to what he said about kind of expanding on the word balance.
Just because it's I'm saying that it's a balanced attack doesn't mean that that's a conservative attack. So I don't ever want to get that confused. And having that balanced approach that's able to adjust and adapt depending on the style of the game or what maybe the score might dictate in any particular game.
So we said a couple other things there. First of all, he made sure to emphasize, he kind of went back, that was later in the press conference, and he volunteered it. He said, listen, I want to make sure that you understand that when I say balance, I don't mean conservative. Still talks about explosive plays, using the run to set up play-action passing game. He was pressed a little bit more by some reporters on some specific things that we're going to see, and he refused to answer those questions. He was gracious about it. He just said, look, I'm not going to talk about specific scheming and game planning. He did talk about how he will, as Brian Schottenheimer did, mesh some of his core concepts, things that he brought with him from the Rams, with things that are already in place with the Seahawks and things that are already working, which might mitigate some of those differences in personnel. Matty Brown, who we had on the show here a couple weeks ago, had said that he didn't think the Seahawks' current personnel up front on the offensive line matched the outside zone running concepts that the Rams are built around. Waldron made it clear he's gonna kind of take what the Seahawks do well, but take some of his core principles from McVay's offense and incorporate that into what they do. He also talked about something that you heard me if you heard me last week with Chris Clough was my biggest complaint with Brian Schottenheimer, and I think his eventual undoing. Schottenheimer, by the way, hired by Urban Meyer in Jacksonville this week as passing game coordinator. To go along with offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell. So the Jags will certainly be an interesting team to watch for Seahawk fans. The last two fired offensive coordinators teaming up in Jacksonville. He talked about adjusting and adapting within the course of a game. And he goes on at length in other places to talk about having a feel. And how many times have you heard me in the last couple of weeks talk about feel? I think it was Schottenheimer's biggest fault. He would oftentimes, the scripted plays, the first 15 that are based on film study during the week and attacking opponents' weaknesses, would be pretty solid. We would see a good first drive or two. There were a couple times this year. The Minnesota game stands out, and there were a couple others where they looked outstanding, and you thought, okay, here we go. But then after he got off script is where he really struggled. The New York Giants game, right? Never adapted to what the Giants were doing. Never adjusted. When all of us sitting on our couches at home are screaming at the couch. Throw shorter passes. Throw quicker. Use the running backs in the passing game. Throw it to the tight end. Get Russell on the move. A lot of those same thoughts against the Rams because they did a lot of the same things with the too-high cover two and some of the things they did defensively. So I think that's important. He also talked about using your players and figuring out how they best fit the scheme. He talked a lot about that, about using all 11 and how, but he went on and I couldn't play his press conference 30 minutes long. I wasn't going to play the whole thing for you. But you can go back and listen to it. It's on the Seahawks YouTube channel. It's also on their website in its entirety. There are a couple of technical difficulties that cut off some answers with, Zoom being what it is these days in our new virtual world. But he talked about how initially you want to get everyone involved, everyone engaged, use players to their strengths, and then as the game goes along, you have playmakers that you need to try to get the ball in their hands, and you adjust with the ebb and flow of the game. So obviously it's all words at this point, right? But real positive that was one of his first go-to philosophies that he wanted to talk about, that balance does not mean being conservative, and that there is a core offensive principle that he's going to bring with him from the Rams. Because we can all agree, there were times the Seahawks offense worked, right? Obviously the first 8 games. It just never adapted to what the league adjusted to them with in the second half of the season. Hopefully Shane Waldron learned some things from Sean McVay and can help make that better. Certainly there were a lot of questions about the quarterback. And when he was first asked about Russell Wilson, he talked more extensively about how they spent a lot of time talking about just their families and getting to know each other. He talked about all the time that you spend as a coordinator with your quarterbacks and how that's an important relationship. And then it took a follow-up question later on for him to expand more on Russell Wilson, the quarterback. Here's some of the things he had to say about Russ.
Yeah, he's an exciting guy to get to work with. He's a guy that utmost respect from afar, from the opposite sideline. A guy that anytime in any situation in the game when, I've been on the offensive side of the ball, but you peek up and you're just saying, man, at any point this guy can explode and create a game-winning play. And, from a positional standpoint, he can make every throw you need to make. He can run any part of any offense that you want to get to. And so I think the best thing for us is going to be really finding out, with this marriage, where we fit together, what things he loves, what things fit offensively, and then moving forward from there. But it couldn't be more excited to work with him.
Again, I think you can tell a lot about a coach's philosophy with things that he volunteers rather than things that he is pressed on. And what he did there is he transitioned from talking about Russ as a quarterback, just as a player and his skill level, to now it's my job to find what he likes to do, what works for him, and how we can maximize his abilities. Again, another thing that I think was at fault, and that might not be fair, to say that Brian Schottenheimer didn't get enough out of Russell Wilson second half of the season in particular because he didn't figure it, he didn't call plays according to what Russ can do well. We don't know, and maybe we'll really find out this time with this transition if it was, at some point we'll know. It might take more than a year. It might be a while. First-time play caller, touch on that in a second, where if we see Russ continuing to make the same mistakes, we see Shane Waldron calling a different offense, a different scheme, more shorter passes, trying to get things to the tight end, trying to involve the running backs, trying to get the ball out quicker, and we still see Russ holding the ball too long, staying in the pocket too long, waiting for the big play downfield when that's not the primary, then we'll know. But what I'm most interested to see is the tempo thing. Russ has been talking about this for 2 years, right? And it doesn't, I think some people, myself included at times, think that by default means no huddle, that he wants to go hurry up. That may be the case, but remember how much Mike Holmgren and Matt Hasselbeck used to talk about tempo. And when that offense would get out of sync sometimes, they would get back into it by talking about tempo. You can huddle and still have tempo, still be quicker. Whatever it was with the way Brian Schottenheimer called plays or got plays in or his terminology or whatever it was, how often did we see the play clock going down to 1, 2, 3 seconds left? Which I always thought was problematic because then it gives the defense more of a chance to get a jump, right? Because they know you got to snap the ball. You can't try to do a hard count with a second left on the play clock. So Russ wants to hurry up, and we'll see. We'll see. That'll be one of the interesting things. We won't see it in the preseason, I don't think. I don't think they're going to want to give that away, but we'll see it early on in the season if it's going to happen or not. But I thought that was interesting. Figuring out how to get the best out of Russell Wilson because his skill set's changing. You can't run zone read with him anymore, or read option, whatever you want to call it. He's just not quick enough to get to the edge anymore. He's lost that. So as he gets older, that's only going to evolve even more. He's going to become more of a pocket passer. Now, when I say pocket, I still want him to move, and there's a lot of history in that Rams offense, even with a guy like Jared Goff who's not extremely mobile. They like to use the bootleg game. Can't wait to see that. I'm really interested to see what he's going to do with Russell Wilson. And then finally, the biggest question on everyone's minds and the biggest criticism, and there was one, if you're in the Seahawks fan group on Facebook, somebody right after the hiring had the guts to post in big, bold letters, what the hell are the Seahawks doing hiring this guy? I've never heard of him. He's never called plays before. And it was one of the greatest threads I've seen in months in that fan group with people, a lot of educated Seahawks fans jumping in against that person. But there's a lot of that sentiment out there. Oh, he's never called plays before. There's a learning curve. There's a lot of unknowns. Well, here's my thing about that. First, let me tell you what Shane Waldron had to say about that, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Here's Waldron on the process of what his responsibilities were as passing game coordinator, how involved he was with the day-to-day decisions there, and then also his thoughts on having never called plays before.
Yeah, kind of wore a lot of different hats in that role, especially, each different year, whether it was from, being responsible for some of the situational aspects of every game, being on the line with him throughout the course of the game, game planning throughout the week, all different areas. So really kind of had a broad stroke in that thing and a lot of different things throughout the week. And yeah, it's a great challenge, and it's a challenge that I've been preparing for my whole life. And so I think it's one of those things that I'm ready to get going with and excited to attack that opportunity.
So he talks about how he's been preparing for this for his whole life, his entire coaching career. And the other thing I thought was key there is he was involved in the game planning in the passing game during the week with a guy that many consider the best or one of the top 3 or 4 play callers and offensive minds in the league. And maybe with a new quarterback, he'll get back to being considered by many to be the best offensive mind in the league. He also talked about being on the headset during games and in on that line. So for his entire time there with the Rams, with Sean McVay, he's in on that process. And if you're someone who has a job where you aspire to be more, or has anything else where you aspire to be more, a hobby, something on the side, what do? You absorb as much information as you can, and then you think, what would I do? Shane Waldron seems like a smart dude. And I can guarantee you that what's happening during those games is every time there's a situation, he's thinking about what would I call here, and then he's hearing what Sean McVay would do in that situation. So he's got a plan. McVay also, he didn't specifically mention it there. He did talk about other situations. What he was referring to there was McVay has let him call plays in preseason games. So there you go. Are there going to be times we second guess him and we resort to calling him rookie mistakes? Yeah, most likely. But how many experienced play callers are there in the league that still face that kind of scrutiny? It happens. It's part of the job, right? A couple of comments. By the way, I can get all the comments here through StreamYard. If you comment on YouTube or Twitter, they'll come through to me. Our buddy Colby Patnode of True to the Trident and Seahawk Maven has a Mariner comment. We'll save that for a little bit later. But my buddy Josh Taylor about the Waldron hire says, I like the hire. Always wondered what Russell Wilson would look like in a new era style offense. I really hope he gets rid of the RPOs. I think the RPOs can still be part of the offense. And I wonder, not to put words in your mouth, Josh, but I wonder if you're talking about, like I mentioned, I wonder if you're talking about the read option. Because Russell Wilson as a threat to run it himself isn't a weapon anymore. But a true RPO in the modern game is running back run versus quick pass option. I think that will be somewhat part of the game. But I think just off the top of my head, when we think about the Rams offense under McVay, I don't think there was a lot of RPO stuff called. I think it was more traditional play action and then boot action off of play action fakes. Russell Wilson, one of the best ball handlers in the game. Can't wait to see what he does in that offense. So here's my thing. I think just by the hire itself, sort of building off what Chris and I talked about last week, even before Shane spoke and we heard from him, I like the hire just because of what it represents, right? When this search started, what were the names we heard? Anthony Lynn. Oh, a lot of people went run-based. Called plays in Buffalo was a 50-50 split. Doug Peterson has the shine worn off Peterson. A lot of Eagles fans would complain about his play calling. Adam Gase was a weird one. The Kirby Wilson interview, guy who'd been a lifetime running backs coach. There was a moment there where it really looked like Pete was driving this ship and it was going to go down a path towards sort of the old retread style of hire. And then we heard Mike Kafka. And then we heard Ken Dorsey. And then we heard Shane Waldron. This is a guy who's on course. He's on a career path to be a head coach someday. Don't believe me? Matt LaFleur hired as head coach out of the McVay system without ever having called plays. Zach Taylor, same thing. Waldron, highly regarded. McVay raves about him. The Rams people and people who cover the Rams talk about how huge of a loss this is for them. Jake Heaps, who has a friend on the Rams staff, says he got a text right after the hire, and he said, of all the guys we've lost this offseason, this one's the one that's going to hurt the most. So Shane Waldron wasn't going to take a job just for the sake of taking a job getting an offensive coordinator title unless he felt it was going to help him get to the next level. And he did talk. He had some things to say about how he expects to run this offense. How, of course, anytime that you're a coordinator under a head coach, he's going to have input, but that he expects to run this ship and guide this offense. I think it was an inspired hire, and honestly, I think it's the only thing really the Seahawks had at their disposal to try and take a leap this year. Not much cap space to speak of. Not very much draft capital, only 4 picks as we talked today. Bunch of restricted free agents and free agents they got to try and take care of. So what you're going to be able to do with the roster itself, very limited. What held them back from playing deeper into the playoffs, maybe even playing Sunday, was execution and efficiency and success on offense second half of the season, and certainly in that playoff game. The only way to change that is to change the approach, change the play caller. And I think they've made a great hire in Shane Waldron. Is it going to work? Who knows? There wasn't a person on the planet, let me put it this way before we toss it to break, not a person on the planet that Pete Carroll could have hired who was available, who was going to come in and universally it would have been agreed that he 100% was going to be able to take this offense to the next level. It just doesn't work that way. I think they hit a home run with Shane Waldron, and I'm excited again. I think if they had hired one of those other guys we talked about, I would have been really cynical, really trepidatious about going into the season, but I'm excited. Again, let's toss it to a break, and we'll come back and talk about some more. You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast on the 365 Sportscast Network. Now let me just find my ads. Here we go. Hollywood and Vine. Here's to you guys. Looking for a place of inspiration to record your next musical or vocal project? Why not do it in the middle of wine country? Hollywood and Vine's recording studio is a 4-room boutique recording studio in the heart of Woodinville Tourist District on Hollywood Hill. Within walking distance of over 100 different wine, beer, and spirit tasting rooms, this peaceful setting offers a respite from the rat race of everything around it. The studio features 14-foot ceilings throughout and a large main tracking room, along with separate isolation rooms for drum tracking and vocals. Featuring a talented crew of freelance engineers and an impressive array of industry-leading equipment, my friends at Hollywood and Vine Studios can assist with your audio tracking, mixing, and mastering pursuits. To find out more or to book a session, email Kevin at hollywood-vines.com, call 206-235-8125, or visit hollywood-vines.com. If you're like me, you love animals. I mean, you love animals. And if you're looking to add a new furry friend to your family, the best way to show your love is by supporting no-kill animal adoption centers. And the best way to do that is by checking out nokillnetwork.org. The volunteers at No Kill Network seek not only to support no-kill adoption centers, but help make a change by working with all animal shelters to change their policies and make sure every pet has the chance to find their human. And with the COVID pandemic, many of these shelters are full, and these pets need you. So check out nokillnetwork.org for a list of no-kill shelters near you, and there's even a handy adoption pet finder tool you can use to help you find your next best friend. That's nokillnetwork.org. Online gamers, have you checked out PSX Extreme? If not, you're missing out. PSX Extreme is a cutting-edge gaming website providing you with everything you need to know about the latest and greatest games.
You'll find up-to-the-minute news about the gaming industry, as well as in-depth reviews of all the coolest games. The writing staff at PSX Extreme will also keep you informed on all the rumors about new games in development and impending releases. So if you can put down the controller just for a second, do yourself a favor and check out psxextreme.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. And now, here's Dan.
All right, so if you're watching the live stream on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook, just learned something new. I can click on one of these comments that comes through and put it up on the screen. So there's my official shout out to Josh and his comment on there as well. Now let's just go back and switch this over. Okay. Let's move on to something that it's gotten a lot of traction the last couple of days. Just when we thought it was over, and I mentioned at the top of the show, this is the time of year that we Seahawks fans are always reminded about the worst moment we've ever experienced in sports, Super Bowl 49. I'll never forget where I was. And I remember it like it just happened 2 minutes ago. I was standing in my spot that I always stood at Aussies when I was the GM there, standing there with my arms folded, watching. And Jermaine Kearse had just made that incredible catch. And then Marshawn had gotten tripped up at the goal line on the play before. We're at the 2-yard line, 26 seconds left. And we all thought we were going to win another Super Bowl when a couple of minutes before it looked like it was slipping through our grasp. And then it was gone, right? Well, Cam came out this week and in a self-penned piece in the Players Tribune, in a piece that was intended to give advice to players playing in the Super Bowl this week. But he couldn't help himself. And he went down that road again. And he dug it all up. It was a little bit of new insight, though, something we'd never heard, or I hadn't heard it anyway, where he said, as they're lining up for the play, 26 seconds left, they all think they're going to hand it to Marshawn and win it. He sees Tom Cable, who was the offensive line coach at the time and the run game coordinator, take his headset off and throw it down on the ground. Had never heard that before. Then he looked out to the field and saw that the Hawks were in gun and knew Marshawn wouldn't be getting it. And he said, at that moment, I was confused as anyone because I realized we weren't going to hand it to Marshawn. Said the loss haunted them for years and that it hung like a cloud over them even his last few years in the league before a neck injury in 2017 ended his career. He said people still come up and ask him all the time, why didn't you hand it to Marshawn? He said, I don't know. I can't figure it out. These dudes need to get over this, first of all. And if you're new to the show, you haven't heard me talk about this situation before, it's still something that's really hard for me to watch when it came up on my Twitter feed for the anniversary of it yesterday or the day before. I can't watch it. I can't watch the replays that they show all week long on NFL Network heading up to the Super Bowl of past Super Bowls. I just can't. It's that painful. But look, throwing it in that situation was the right call. And if you can't look yourself in the mirror and admit that you're just using hindsight as 20/20 and revisionist history, then you just need to get a grip on your emotions. I get it. It hurt. And you want to try and reconcile that, right? There was only one timeout left. Some people say, well, in retrospect, maybe they use that timeout there and then they can go talk about it. Maybe then New England comes out in a different set, right? But in that situation where they had called 2 plays in the huddle the play before, Marshawn gets tripped up at the 2, heading in. He had a pass and a run call available to him. Okay? A lot of people forget that. So they think that it was just automatic 100%. They were going to throw the ball no matter what in that situation. They come out of the huddle and they go up to the line and they see that New England's in goal line. They got 9 players in the box. Against the Seahawks that spread it out in 11 personnel. So of course you're going to throw the ball there. If you simply hand it to Marshawn in 11 personnel out of the gun into a 9-man box, a good 9-man box, that's not going to work, right? This idea that he would have scored no matter what is just flawed. It's just wrong. Coaches all around the league are on the record as saying that they agree with that. Most fans, I think, I'd say 80% of my Twitter feed the last 24, 48 hours since this came out agree with that. But the point is that there's a core group of players on that team that never understood that, couldn't agree with that, and it ruined what should have been a multiple. That team should have got back to another Super Bowl or two. But Cam, Earl, Sherman, Bennett, Averill, even KJ Wright, all those guys, they just can't get over it. They're all guys on defense. A defense that had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter and let it slip away. So it wasn't the decision to throw. It was the actual play call and the personnel. You're going to have your fifth best wide receiver as the primary target and your third best wide receiver trying to block Brandon Browner to make the play happen, right? Here's what I say. My last thought on this play. I think, and this is totally numbers I'm pulling out of the air just based on how I feel about the whole scenario. If you run that play 100 times, if you put it into a simulator and consider all the factors, you run it 100 times, I think they score 60 times on that play with 39 incomplete passes and 1 pick. Malcolm Butler made the perfect play. However, and this kind of ties in to what we're talking about with offensive philosophy and a new play caller and a new fresh set of ideas, and can it be better than it's been? Because the offense has been good over the last 10 years, for the most part, but it's always seemed to just come up a little bit short. What I take away from this, I don't know if you all do, but when Cam said, and then I turned around and saw the formation and knew we weren't going to throw it to hand it to Marshawn Lynch. What the hell is that? Because that damn sure means that the Patriots knew. And in fact, Malcolm Butler said he recognized that exact formation, knew the exact play call, knew exactly where he had to break on the ball. They didn't lose that Super Bowl because they didn't hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch. They lost that Super Bowl because they called a play that they had gone to in that exact situation time and time again over that year. They had scored on it twice that year. The Patriots had scouted it, knew exactly what was coming. Even if the personnel had been different. You put Doug Baldwin, put your best receiver in that position. He probably feels Malcolm Butler coming, shields him from the ball a little bit better, and at worst, can you tell I'm near an airport? At worst, the ball gets knocked down or it's incomplete. But their failure, those players' failure to deal with that as men, cost the Seahawks, basically forced a rebuild. Because think about it this way. Tom Brady's won 6 Super Bowls, right? He's lost 4. 2007, 2011, they lost twice to the New York Giants, both in heartbreaking fashion. 2007, the David Tyree catch. 2011, the Mario Manningham sideline catch. He didn't whine about it. The team didn't fall apart because of it. Defense didn't get all mad. They went out and won 3 more after that. So I think it just points to the fact that team needed to be rebuilt. They had to move on from those players, and even though Cam's was forced by injury. And the fact they were able to do that and not end up drafting in the top 10 during that transition, pretty remarkable. Real quick, my Super Bowl take is this. I have a couple of reasons to not want Tampa to win this. And I'm terrible at picking games, so don't take what I say and run with it at all. The Seahawks and Buccaneers are expansion brothers, came in the league at the same time. We each have 1 Super Bowl win. I don't want them to beat us to a second one, right? I don't have anything against Tom Brady. I know a lot of people want the Chiefs to win just because they don't like Tom Brady or because he's won enough, and I get it. Dynasties get old. From a pure sports standpoint, it's fascinating. I've said for a long time, and I've taken a lot of heat for this. I've been saying it for 7 or 8 years. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback ever to live, and I think this proves it. It's not Belichick. It's not McDaniels. It's Brady. But I think Kansas City wins here simply because Pat Mahomes is next level. I think he has a chance to get close to accomplishing what Tom Brady has accomplished. I think that Steve Spagnuolo will put a good enough plan together on defense. And even with their 2 starting offensive tackles out, the Chiefs I'm talking about, with all those weapons and Andy Reid game planning and having an extra week and having Pat Mahomes at his disposal, they'll find a way. And I think the Chiefs come out on top 7 points, let's say. I think it's going to be a great game, though. Real quick, my thoughts on the Rams trading Jared Goff, a 2020 third-rounder, and first-round picks in 2022 and 23 to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. I've read a lot of this. Boy, the Rams are scary now. A lot of Seahawks fans. Oh, crap. And I get it. Is Stafford an upgrade over Goff? Probably. I think he's better vertically, throwing the football down the field. But is he that much better to justify not having a first-round pick until 2024 and building yourself around a 32-year-old quarterback who, granted, he missed 8 games in 2019. Prior to that, a lot of people think he's been beat up, and he has, but he played, I think, 7 years in a row without missing a game. And I've always liked Matt Stafford. He's tough. He's competitive. McVay wanted him. So if there's a scary aspect to it, that might be it. But doesn't make him that much better. And if it does, they damn well better win a Super Bowl. They better win a Super Bowl because they have, you talk about the definition of all in. You thought the Seahawks went all in by trading 2 firsts for Jamal Adams this last year. Let's compare the situations a little bit. Rams right now are $31 million over the salary cap with 17 free agents. Next year even, they are, next year I think they have $38 million. Yeah, next year $38 million to work with. $32 million over the cap right now. Compare that to the Seahawks. They have about $2 million to work with right now, but they have $160 million to work with next year, between 140, 160, depending on which site you look at. So they can be a lot more creative than the Rams in trying to free up some cap space this year to add players. Rams are stuck. Jalen Ramsey's not going anywhere. Aaron Donald's not going anywhere. The Rams are paying almost as much in dead cap space to Jared Goff this year as they are to Matt Stafford, $19 million to $22 million. Yeah, the Seahawks don't have a first-round draft pick for the next couple of years either. But the Rams into 2024, they really better win now. I mean, they're going to lose some free agents this year. Leonard Floyd, not going to be able to afford to keep him. And they're going to lose some other guys as well. I don't believe that method of building a roster is sustainable. And you know how I know that? Because the Seahawks tried it. They tried paying all their stars after those Super Bowl runs and then trading a first-round draft pick for Jimmy Graham. And look what it got him. A couple of drafts that didn't go great. Those players got disenchanted, got hurt, and they had to rebuild. Ask the New Orleans Saints how they feel about that. I mean, they had one of the NFL's best defenses this year, right? They went all in. They got Alvin Kamara, Sean Payton, Drew Brees, $100 million over the cap, and they didn't get a Super Bowl out of it. They better win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years in L.A., or it's probably going to be the end of Sean McVay and Les Snead down there. And now, I guess, it's up to the San Francisco 49ers to make the next move, right? There's talk this week of them attempting to get Kirk Cousins in a trade from the Vikings. Of course, he worked with Shanahan in Washington, but the Vikings don't want to take Jimmy Garoppolo off their hands, so that may not happen. Free agency opens on March 15th, the legal tampering period. They can sign players beginning March 17th. One of the things we see a lot, anytime there's a head coach that changes from one team to another or a coordinator, when there's an opportunity to bring some players with you that fit a need, it helps in the transition. There are plenty of opportunities for Shane Waldron to bring guys to the Seahawks that fit needs and that also are should be affordable enough, especially in a season with a limited cap coming off the pandemic. I think a lot of guys are going to sign one-year deals and then try to reestablish some value to get back into the free agent market next year. I think there's 3 that really make sense. Guys that are in their prime, age-wise, and that fit needs. The first one is Austin Blythe. 7th-round pick of the Colts 4 years ago. Started out as a guard. Came over to the Rams on waivers in 2017. Started at right guard his first 2 years. They moved him to center last year, and he started all 16 games. 6'3", 298. He's 26 years old. He's athletic. He's not a big bruising center, but he's athletic. Had the top I think he had the best 3-cone shuttle time at the combine at his position group. According to Pro Football Focus, better run blocker than pass blocker, but they're trying to establish a run, right? As much as we know, though, that the Seahawks need to improve their pass protection in the interior, I think left guard's going to be addressed as a primary need in the draft. Allowed 4 sacks and almost 1,200 snaps. Overall grade on PFF of 69.3. Made $3.9 million last year. That might be tough. But because of his age and his familiarity with Waldron and with the offensive line coach that he brought with him as well, it's another thing we didn't even have time to get into. And with Ethan Posick, a free agent, I think Blythe would make sense. Another guy, Gerald Everett. We know that the Rams love to use their tight ends. We saw Higbee and Everett as a great tandem down there. Seahawks already have Will Dissly. We know when he's healthy. We like him a lot. Colby Parkinson drafted last year. 6'7", intriguing target there. We'd like to see how Shane Waldron uses him. But Gerald Everett may be a guy with Jacob Hollister as a free agent. Gerald Everett 1 year younger, 6'3", 239. About the same size as Hollister, more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. Could be a guy that you could swap in. He's been more productive over the last couple of years. Over the last 3 seasons, his average season over the last 3, 27 catches, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. Only made $1.5 million last year. Hollister made twice that, $3.5 million, I think, something like that. So Gerald Everett could be a guy you swap in for Jacob Hollister and help install that offense and bring some continuity with Shane Waldron. And then Josh Reynolds might be a market for him, but man, you look at the wide receiver market out there for free agents, and it is flooded. And I think with salary cap ramifications this year, Josh Reynolds his cap hit last year was $2.3 million. Could be a guy that makes a lot of sense. We talked last week about how the Seahawks need to add another weapon to go along with Lockett and Metcalf. It's certainly Reynolds familiar with that. Had a nice game against the Seahawks earlier this season, the regular season. 26 years old, 6'3", 194, a little bit bigger. But he's got speed to go deep. Coming off his best year, 52 catches, 618 yards, 12 yards per catch, a couple of touchdowns. I could see any one of those 3 or all 3 of those free agents being targets of the Seahawks this offseason. Reynolds was mentioned. ESPN's Bill Barnwell did an interesting list. 43 free agent wide receivers. Go check it out on ESPN.com because he really gets into detail about where he thinks a lot of these players, he categorizes them, and then where he thinks they might end up, really even gets into projected contract values. 2 interesting things out of that. And then beyond the 43, there was like 20 other names that he mentioned that he couldn't even get to, and he just had a little blurb on. So that tells you how flooded the wide receiver market is. He sees Reynolds, I think he had him going to the Bengals, sees his value potentially 2 years, $10 million. That seems a little rich in this market. I don't know that he'll get that. But it's all just about fit, right? And how much a team might value a certain player and how he thinks he might fit into their system. But certainly he's intriguing. One other thing that I think was interesting out of that note, he actually had Golden Tate, who's a free agent this year, former Seahawks draft pick out of Notre Dame, part of that first Super Bowl winning team. Then he left as a free agent. They wanted to bring him back, but he had a market, and they couldn't afford to pay him what he wanted to get. And he ended up moving on to Detroit. He had him coming back to Seattle on a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. Could totally see that. They need a guy that can work in the slot. That's Tate's forte. He seems to have kept his relationships intact with Pete Carroll. Always says nice things about his time in Seattle. What do you think about a Golden Tate reunion back here in Seattle? Interesting. I wanted to throw this up here with Colby and his comment, and here it was with that top 100 list MLB Pipeline came out with this week. MLB Pipeline's disrespect to Noelvi Marte is noted. I believe Marte was mentioned by Baseball America in their next 10, or maybe he was in the top 100. And then Kirby and somebody else was in their next 10, but at least he was mentioned. He was either in BA's 100, top 100, or he was in that next 10. Not mentioned at all by MLB Pipeline, the young the young international signee. I think he's just 18 years old, still playing shortstop. Some people think he's going to end up ultimately at third base. But great comment there. Thanks, Pat, for that. I appreciate that as always. And by the way, Colby, we're going to need to get you and Ty on the show soon, do a spring training preview. So I'll be reaching out to you on Twitter a little bit later with that. Next week, we're going to talk more about free agents, but I wanted to get into the Rams specifically there because I do think that it's important. We're going to get into the draft as well. I wanted to give this disclaimer because some people have already reached out and asked me some things about this year's draft. And my go-to answer this year is going to be, I don't know. I'm going to have to rely on some of my other buddies and colleagues who study the draft more than I do. And Corbin Smith, I'm talking to you. I'll be leaning on you a lot this year. I just don't have time to get into it as much as I normally do. In a typical year, I can speak fairly in a fairly educated manner about the top 5 rounds of Seahawk prospects. And I can identify players that I think match what they're looking for and match some of the standards that they usually identify in their draft prospects. This year, I just don't have time. And so last year, I mean, you talk about tale of two extremes. Last year in March was when the pandemic really, really started, and I was laid off from my main job because restaurants were all shut down here. And so I dove into it 100%. I studied the draft more than I ever did. This year is going to be really hard to get used to. It's funny, though, because I'm still addicted. Still addicted to the draft, still addicted to mock drafts. But yesterday, I opened a couple of my favorite mock draft simulators and hit play. And I can make a pick in the second round, maybe trade down, maybe make a second and fourth round pick. And then I was done. I just didn't know any of the players. So draft coverage on the Emerald City Sportscast this year is going to be done through the use of other players. I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl. I think, first of all, I think anytime you talk about the Super Bowl, we need to give credit to the NFL for what they were able to accomplish. Nobody thought we were going to get through an entire NFL season. Nobody did. I did. I was optimistic. I thought the motivation was there. I thought that the model with not having fans in the stands could work for football. From a financial standpoint, it still worked for the league, I think. And while we did have a couple of hiccups, I don't know if the word hiccup is disrespectful in any way to people that have had to deal with COVID-19 on the front lines. There were some things early in the season. Some games had to be postponed. But there are now indications, and there are reports now that what the NFL was able to accomplish in getting through this pandemic and being able to play a full season, and some of the techniques they use to protect their players and track their players are now being used in a clinical sense, in an educational environment. And what they did is being studied by other entities and other organizations. How can we do this? I think 6-8 months ago when we were kind of in the thick of this thing and we didn't know exactly where it was going, and I know I'm guilty of this, we thought that, well, shoot, let's just get to 2021, get through this football season somehow, some way, get to 2021. By baseball season, it's all going to be back to normal, right? Not quite, right? Jerry DePoto did say a couple of weeks ago he does expect at some point this year there will be fans back in the stands. If you're listening to me from Washington, Governor Inslee said last week as part of Phase 2 that attendance at sporting events can be allowed. He didn't get into specifics, though. I think at some point this next season we're going to be able to expect full stands. And I think by the time all indications now are that 200 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine will be in arms now by May. The CDC had originally thought that would be June or July. That's positive. That's, almost 2/3 of the country, right? So really excited about what's coming this fall. Fans back in the stands, things back to normal football. But the fact they were able to get through this pandemic as they were is remarkable. And it's a credit to everyone involved with that league. And I think it all culminates in the game this Sunday where we get to watch two great football teams, a legendary quarterback, the best to ever do it at this level, and then the next young gun, next best to ever do it. I think 30 years from now, we're going to be have a lot of conversations about who's the best quarterback of all time, Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. This is going to be a fun Super Bowl to watch. Some shout-outs today. Got to give love to my guys, Kevin, Mike, and the gang at Hollywood and Vine Recording Studio at Woodinville in Woodinville, Washington for their support. The guys at freebets.us, Alex Morietti and Eric Briggs for their contributions to the show. Jordan Van Beek, check out his Twitch stream at twitch.tv/geekbeak. Next week, as I said, we'll take a deeper look into free agency. I'll give you 3 names on offense and 3 names on defense that are affordable, that can fit into the salary structure and fit needs for the Seahawks. Hang on. Just choosing my outro music for the day. Go with this breezy little number here. We'll also check in with the Mariners, see if there's any more headway with them adding to their bullpen or any other area of the roster. Still a ton of free agents out there yet unsigned. And as every day goes by, their cost comes down and they become more affordable as attractive options for the Mariners. And next week when we talk, we'll be 1 week away from spring training starting for the Mariners. Hard to believe, right? Join me again live next week on the 365 Sportscast Network every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Download the 365 Sportscast app for Android and iPhone. Listen at 365sportscast.com. Check out their other shows as well. Follow them on Twitter at 365 Sportscast for all of those times. Please subscribe to the Emerald City Sportscast podcast. It's also, you can listen to it as a replay, or if you don't get to catch it live, on whichever podcast platform you prefer to listen to. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever, as always. And subscribe to the Emerald City Sportscast YouTube channel for these live streams and replays of the video versions of this show as well. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Until next week, I am Dan Viennes. You've been listening to the Emerald City Sportscast. Go Seahawks. Go Mariners. Go Cougs. Thanks. I'm out.